All right, well, we got over here, I got the hub and the spindle over here at the table, and we're going to get this. You can see this is the bearing race where the hub went out, or where the bearing went out. You can see it's all eat up, and pretty sad shape. There's a chunk gone out of it right there. So what we got to do is we got to get up in this hub and get these old races out from the old bearings so that we can put the new bearings in their place. And the best tool to do that with, if you got one, is a slide hammer like this. You can set these little grabbers in there to reach right down in there and clamp on the back side of that race, and then just, well, I can get them on there. And then just yank that sumbitch out. There we go. That race comes right out to get everything lined up just right. We're going to turn the vise around and go at it from the back side. Now on the back side, there is a seal. This is the inner axle seal that seals this hub to the spindle, and you got to pull that out first. You can see on this, here is the eat up piece. This is actually the little ring that held them rollers on that inner bearing, and it is eat up all to hell. It was actually stuck in the back of that seal there. This old grease here is full of metal. There's another piece of that ring. This old grease is just full of metal flakes from all that stuff in there grinding on each other. There's not much of this race left. This may be hard to get out of here. There is not much lip left on that race. That's going to be I'm going to have to use the punch on this one because there's not enough for the slide hammer to grab. Alright, the old shop punch was rounded off and wouldn't get a bite on that race, so I took it over to the bench grinder and flattened it out so it's got some edges to grip with now. And I laid the hub and disc down here on the table so I can see all the way around the race, and it'll make it easier for me to knock it out. Alright, now then, finally, after a lot of beating, you can see there's a big old lip in here that this race butts up against to, so there ain't a whole lot on the back side to grab it to. I had to flatten off the tip of my punch a couple different times because it was eating it up, slipping off of there. But I finally got the race to move and got it out of there. So now what I got to do is I'm going to take this hub over to the parts washer and clean it out and get all that old nasty grease. And there was actually some water in the hub, so I'm going to clean it up a little bit. And now we're going to work on but before I do that, we're going to work on the spindle here. I'm going to get this old race here off, the one from the inside bearing that went out, and then we're also going to go in here and pull out this needle bearing that holds the four-wheel drive axle because it's all seized up and in pretty sad shape. So I'm going to put this on here and try to get this race off. Probably because of the way it is on here, it's so close to the seal surface, I'm going to have to start using with a chisel to get this to separate and come off a little bit, and then I'll be able to get behind it with a punch or something and get it off of there. Actually, it's going to come off real nice and easy. Well, maybe. There we go. It'll come right off. So now that's out. We'll move on around here to the inside bearing. See how much of a bitch that's going to be. Alright, I found me an old hitch pin that slides up in this spindle just right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little pry bar in here like that and put the spindle up against it and hold up on this and hit this with the hammer and push that out of there. And that little bearing just come right out. I'm going to take these parts over to the Varsol tank and get them cleaned up and ready for the new bearings to go on. All right, so I took the hub and spindle over to the Varsol tank and washed them off and cleaned everything up real nice so that when I put the new bearings on there, there won't be anything to get in them and mess them up. Got all this is all cleaned off real nice. You can see up in there I cleaned out the tube, scrubbed everything off on the outside here where the hub rides. And I did the same thing on this the main hub right here. Got it all cleaned out where the new bearings are going to sit and new seal. So we're just going to get started right now putting the new races in for the new bearings. I'm going to start with the hub, and this smaller bearing goes on the outside, and it's all together. It's got the bearing and the race all in packaged together. Now, my press is bent all to shit, so it would not be a good idea to try to push these in with it. So I'm going to very carefully tap these races into place with my punch. Now, you want to be real careful that when you're doing this, you don't want to let the punch slip and mar the front of the race, because that will that'll cause your bearing to wear out quicker. You'll be real careful not to mess any of that stuff up. You go tap around it real even, go in full circles around the face. Go tap evenly in a circle around the face of the race until it seats all the way down in its position. That way you don't get it in there crooked and warp it or anything funny like that. And it's kind of a slow process, but if you take your time and go ahead and do everything right, then you'll have less problems further down the road. You'll know it's fully seated when your hammer starts bouncing back at you and the chisel will kind of jump a little bit. You don't want to hit it anymore after it gets to that point, because you'll mess up the front of the race. So that one's all seated in there real nice. We'll flip it over and put the back one in. Now this one came separate from the inner bearing. For what reason, I'm not sure. I would not replace just one or the other, but that's the way Timken did it, so that's what I got. We'll drop this down in here and do the same thing that I did on the front. Now, if for some reason the race doesn't seem to be moving back into the housing like you think it ought to be, and there's still a lot of room to go, take your finger and feel in there between the back spacing and the back of the race and see if you haven't accidentally got it crooked. And if you have, figure out where it's lowest and tap directly across from that and straighten it back up, and then go back to beating around in a circle. All right, once you got your races in your in your hub and everything done with that, the next thing you want to do is you want to pack this bearing. This is the bearing that goes on the inside, drops right down here in the back of the hub, and you got to have it in before you can put the back seal on. So what we want to do is we want to take this and pack it full of grease. Now, there's two ways that you can do this. You can do it the old-fashioned way, where you get a big old glob of grease in your hand and work it into the bearing, make a big ass mess and get grease all over the place. Or you can go and get one of these dudes. And what this does is it takes the bearing and it sandwiches it in these two cones, and on the top right here is a little grease alamite, and you pump grease in there with a grease gun and it pushes it out down here and packs the bearing. So that's what I'm going to use. You just set the bearing down on there and put the top cone down on top of it, right like that. It helps if you center it up. It'll pack more evenly that way, and you don't have a big glob of grease coming out one side. But get it tight down in there, and take your grease gun and put it right down there on that alamite and start pumping. start to see grease squirt out the bottom of the bearing around where the little rollers are. Once you get it all filled up, you can stop, take your grease gun off, and you can see down in here the grease is coming out of that bearing, which means that it's good and packed full. So we're going to take it out of here. I'm going to take this top piece off. I'm going to wipe the extra grease off. Don't make too big a mess. Take that top piece off, and there is your freshly packed bearing. Full of grease on the inside too. Now, we'll take a big old glob of this and put it around on the outside. Just want to set that bearing right down there in its spot. Now we're going to take our seal here and just clean some of this out where the seal sits. This is the back seal that seals this hub to the spindle, keeps all that grease in there and keeps the water out. Now we're going to set this right in here, try to get it started as even as we can, and take our hammer and tap real slow around the edge, real even, just like we did the bearing race. Don't need to punch. We're going to tap this down until it's flush with the back of the hub. And there you go. So now we're going to get started on the spindle. Make sure everything's clean. And I think I'm going to start by putting the inner bearing in, and I'm going to set it in the vise to do this so that I don't mar up these threads on the end of the spindle. And take the vise and open it wide enough that I can sit this piece in here on the outer bolt ring. That way we don't mar up the sealing surface or the bearing race surface. I'm going to open up this kit here and get our new little bearing out. Alright. I'm going to take this new bearing here and try to make sure you don't get anything nasty in it. I'm going to drop it down in here like this and real gently tap it into place. So now we got our spindle bearing is all good. The back side here is cleaned up for the seal to the axle. So now we are ready to take all these pieces over and put them on the truck.